Welcome to the groundbreaking news program that delves into the heart of Mormonism, your weekly window into the unique intersections of news, history, and culture that resonate with the tapestry of Mormonism. So whether you're tuning in from the heart of Utah or joining us from around the world, your favorite news program starts now, where news meets insight, and the stories of our faith unfold.
Good evening. Good evening.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Mormon Newscast. It is Monday evening, February 12th, and we are here to bring you all of the news in the Mormon landscape today. I am joined by my illustrious panelists, Bill Reel. How are you tonight, Bill?
Happy Valentine's Day, Rebecca.
You are dressed for it, as am I. Our other panelists, the wonderful Radio Free Mormon, are you dressed for Valentine's Day?
I'm always dressed for Valentine's Day.
He's a romantic at heart. And I forgot to say that I am Rebecca Biblioteca, and we're very excited to be able to discuss some of the big stories that are out there today. We're going to be starting with Bill Reel. What do you have for us tonight, Bill?
Awesome. Let me throw this onto the screen. So first off, MrBeast joins Mormonism, and so we've got a little video here that we'll jump to see what's going on.
Awesome.
There's no conversion in the cards for MrBeast, but he's turning heads by joining forces with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to boost their service initiative, Just Serve. An American YouTuber, online personality, entrepreneur, and philanthropist, MrBeast is known for his fast-paced and high-production YouTube videos, which feature elaborate challenges and large cash giveaways. With over 238 million subscribers, he is the most subscribed individual on YouTube and the second most subscribed channel overall. Recent news revolves around the collaboration by MrBeast and the LDS Church aimed at amplifying the impact of the Just Serve program through MrBeast's substantial online influence. MrBeast's involvement is focused on leveraging his social media reach to promote the Just Serve app. The app connects volunteers with service opportunities in their local communities, aligning MrBeast's commitment to making a positive impact in the world. MrBeast's significant following has the potential to mobilize a large number of volunteers and to contribute to the success of the Just Serve program, helping the LDS Church create some positive publicity after a long stretch of bad PR. This will likely help the LDS Church give off the impression that it prioritizes philanthropy and community service. But does the LDS Church do a lot of philanthropy in comparison to how much wealth it has? Recently, the Widow's Mite released its end-of-year 2023 report, and we learned that while the LDS Church has approximately $265 billion in accumulated wealth, and brought in approximately $30 billion in wealth just this past year, it spent a measly 0.4% of their total accumulated wealth, or $115 million, on humanitarian efforts. For every dollar spent on humanitarian aid, $122 went into church investments. And while all of that should raise eyebrows and red flags, I do think the Just Serve program does a lot of good. Looking at only southern Utah, I saw about 100 opportunities to serve, and I didn't see much self-promotion on the website by the church, which leaves me thinking, for the first time in a long time, seeing the church doing a good thing here that seems to have little to no strings attached. Back to you, Rebecca.
Yeah, that is a really interesting story. And I have to say, I love the thumbnail you made. I think that raised a lot of eyebrows as we tried to imagine what would it be like if MrBeast did join the church. That's very interesting. But yeah, I don't know if a lot of people know about this Just Serve app. It's been around for a while, and I'm sure now that it's connected to MrBeast and he's promoting it, that a lot more people will be taking advantage of it. My first question, of course, was, is this like the giving machine? If you remember what we talked about, I think it was our very first episode of the newscast where we talked about the church acting kind of as a middleman so that other people donate. The church facilitates it, but it's not their money. And then they get all this amazing PR. So my question was along the lines of, will they count these volunteer hours, somehow monetize them like they do other volunteer hours, both of members of the church and others that participate in church sponsored service projects? And once they monetize them, will they count that in some way as charitable giving? That was my cynical point of view, but I did discuss that with some people from the Widows' Night, and it doesn't look like that's what's happening. But they're definitely going to get a lot of publicity and appear to be a hugely charitable organization. And that statistic for every dollar that goes to charity, 122 go into the church's massive fund. I just don't know how, in good conscience, any organization that says they're a church or someone with a charitable mission can be okay with that. What do you think, RFM?
Well, remember that this massive fund, the EPA account, is registered as a charity. It is a charity. That's how it's registered. And we'll see if the IRS has anything they want to say about that after they conclude their investigation. By the way, I think that this is a remarkable fulfillment of prophecy in the book of Revelation, that the LDS Church is finally formally taking upon itself the mark of the beast. You knew that was coming. You could tell that was coming. This is a great idea, though. This Just Serve, is that what it's called?
Just Serve.
And you need some help, and you put it up there on like this bulletin board, this virtual bulletin board, and other people will volunteer to come help you. Is that how it goes?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there are service opportunities that are specifically LDS centric. Like I think I saw indexing and cannery, things like that. But then there's just a lot in the community where you are that you could sign up for.
I think this has a lot of good in it, a lot of potential success in it, and it certainly seems to be able to be connecting potential victims with local serial killers.
I will add, Rebecca, you pointed this out, which is like the giving machines, the church seems to do these acts that really require very little spending on its end, and it allows to sort of ride on the backs of everyday people out there. And this Just Serve, while I, again, noted in the video, I think this really is a good thing, it also is a very inexpensive way for the church to be involved in charity work.
Well, the church even goes further than that, and that's going to be Rebecca's story at the end of the show, where the church doesn't just do nothing and take credit for it. They'll actually do bad things, and then much later, they'll take credit for it like they did something good.
Yep, they're very good at it. I have to give them props for that, for sure. But again, I really feel like the Giving Machine, their reputation is incredible, and people discover the Giving Machine. They discover this app, and they really think it's just pure charity for charity's sake. And only the rest of us that dig in behind the scene realize that's not exactly what it is. And again, people are being served just like the Giving Machine. People are getting help. So I'm not sure if it's completely a bad thing, but we, of course, look at that and go, they could do so much more. It seems like so much money that they're giving, but we all know that it's not comparatively.
It's like that episode from The Twilight Zone, right? To serve mankind.
I love
It's
that.
a cookbook.
It's a cookbook. That's right. For those of you who haven't seen the episode, the aliens arrive. They have a wonderful book with them to serve mankind.
One of them is Lurk,
human beings think, that it's going to be all wonderful. And then they find out it's a cookbook to serve mankind. So what we're trying to say is
we're going to find out about this Just Serve, I bet.
Yep. There's a hidden agenda. Maybe that's the prediction we're making. But we did check with the Widow's Mite before making these, outrageous accusations. And as it was explained to me, they do seem to report the hours or the use of the Just Serve app in a little bit of a different way than they report other things. But they couldn't really confirm or deny that there was anything going on that wouldn't be up and above board. So I guess we'll just wait and see. And we'll see how many people discover this app. I'm sure with MrBeast's connection, there could possibly be millions of people that want to take advantage of this. So, and hopefully that means millions of people helped and served. That's what I'm hoping. So any other final thoughts on the MrBeast breaking news story?
No, he's a big deal.
It
He's a
is a
big
big
deal.
deal.
Yeah.
He is a big deal. He is a very big deal. And I forgot to go to our second slide and cover the stories that we were going to cover, but now we're right in the middle of it. So I guess we just go ahead with Radio for Mormon, who's going to be talking about an update from Tim Ballard. We haven't really heard much from him recently, but here he is back in the news again.
There's been stuff going on behind the scenes, and there was a story that broke last Friday on, what was it, February 9th, I think it was, about a motion that had been filed by Tim Ballard. And it got covered by the news, and it was covered in such a way that I was completely confused. I thought it meant something else. So I went digging, thinking I was going to have one story, and then I found out, no, it's not that at all. It's something completely different and much more entertaining. So here's what's going on. There have been a number of motions that have been filed since this story broke, since the lawsuits were filed. I covered those in detail on Radio Free Mormon. But what happened is this. I thought from this news story, and it's like 34 seconds long, KUTV will play it here in a second. I had thought that Tim Ballard's lawyers were making a motion to suppress or strike those witness statements that they had attached to their complaint. Okay, that's what I had thought. That's what it sounded like. And I thought from that this was a strange move, because it sounds like everybody's kind of forgotten about them, but now you're going to file a motion to suppress them, which is going to bring public attention back to them again. And I didn't know if that was the best move. But that's not what's been going on. Actually, the motion that I thought it was and that I just described to you has already happened. That motion was filed on November 2nd. So let's just say November, okay? You don't have to remember these dates exactly right now. But it was filed on November, and it was granted by the judge January 12th of this year, 2024. That was the motion to seal the documents that were attached to the original complaints. You may recall when I talked about them, I said how unusual this was, how out of the normal course this was. And it seemed like they were just trying to get all this information out there to smear Tim Ballard. Of course, when you talk about people who could use a good smearing, maybe it's Tim Ballard, maybe it's not. But looking at it from a legal point of view, this is really strange, unusual, beyond the pale. But those things were sealed now by a judge who agreed that they should not be public. Of course, they're all out of the bar now. Everybody knows about them. So if we can go to the next slide. So that was the motion filed November 2nd, 2023. All right. Okay, I'm sorry, because I had made these slides and then I had rearranged them to make them more sense and make them make more sense. And now they're going to make less sense. But this is about Tim Ballard filing the motion to have the exhibits filed with the complaints classified as private, what I just talked about. So they're not accessible to the public anymore, at least not from the courthouse. Of course, they're everywhere else in the world. And this motion was granted on January 12th, 2024. Next slide, please. Oh, actually, am I able to do that, Bill?
I don't know. You won't be able to.
Okay. All right. And here's the order. And if you could just go to the full screen on this order, Bill, so I can read it. So there it is. This is the case with the 5 female people who are represented by initials as the plaintiffs against Tim Ballard and Operation Underground Railroad. So this is the order from January 12th, which granted the defendant Tim Ballard's motion to classify the documents as protected. Next page, please. The court, having considered defendant Timothy Ballard's motion to classify documents as private and or protected, and good cause appearing, grants the motion in part and hereby classifies exhibits 1 or I through Q in the first amended complaint filed November 2nd, 2023 as protected and therefore not publicly accessible. It says it's entered by the court on the date indicated by the court seal at the top of the first page. There's no seal up there. But if you go down to this last page, yeah, there's the 12th day of January. I hereby certify that on this 12th day of January, 2024, I caused a copy of the foregoing to be served on all counsel of record via the court's electronic filing system. So it was entered this order January 12th. Going to the next one. Now, this KUTV story that broke last Friday, February 9th, 2024, the one that I said that was very confusing about this, let's go ahead and play that if we can. And it's just 34 seconds long. You'll see what I mean.
Much new at 6 tonight. Attorneys for Operation Underground Railroad founder Tim Ballard once again calling on the court to throw out, quote, stolen documents. Today's motion filed with the court taking aim at a 168-page addendum to Ballard's attorneys call salacious and, quote, full of unauthenticated allegations against Ballard. The documents go on to say that the plaintiffs in this case stole the documents to purposely damage Ballard's reputation. We have these new court filings, all of them on our website. If you'd like to read them more in depth, you can go to our website.
And that was the one where I was talking about. This is what this motion does, is it draws attention to all of these documents that had already been forgotten. All right. And that's what I took it as saying. Can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah, I had to go out and take this picture personally. This is the cow that's out of the barn. And it seemed to me that what they were doing was the cow's already out of the barn. The cow is now a dot on the horizon. And now they're going out there, they're roping the cow, they're tying it up, they're dragging it back to the barn so they can let it out again. And everybody can watch it run away. That's actually not what's happening. Okay. That was my misconception. So here's what's going on. If we can get the next slide, please, Mr. Reel. We talked about the November motion to seal those documents, those exhibits in the complaint. This is a separate motion. Now, it sounds similar, so it's easy to get confused on this. But the motion they filed in December, this is Tim Ballard filing it in December, isn't to seal them. It's alleging that these documents were stolen from Tim Ballard, that they should be either returned and or destroyed so that the plaintiffs don't have them anymore because they wrongfully obtained them, is the allegation. By the way, the reason for this allegation is because one of the plaintiffs there, her last name is Boris, B-O-R-Y-S. It might be Boris. I'm not sure if she has a certain pronunciation to it. I'll just say Boris. So she was the executive secretary for Tim Ballard up until a few days before she filed her lawsuit. So she's his executive secretary, according to these allegations, right? She works for him. She has access to his email. She's got the passwords, everything, just like executive secretaries do. And the allegation that they're trying to find out is, it looks like she was helping herself to these documents in anticipation of litigation. So then she quits. Some days later, she files a lawsuit. Lo and behold, look at what's attached to her complaint. All these documents, right? So that's the basis that they're claiming that these are stolen. They say they need to be either destroyed and or returned to them so that they're not in their possession anymore. And then we need to go back to the discovery process, which is supposed to take place in an orderly fashion. Okay, so going back to the slide, KUTV from December 20th, 2023 stated, Operation Underground Railroad founder Tim Ballard filed a new motion on December 20th. He is requesting that the court remove confidential information from evidence that was allegedly stolen by Ballard's former assistant. The motion filed by Ballard's attorneys asked for his alleged stolen information returned, orders the anonymous plaintiffs to identify themselves and their allegations, and requests an extension on his time to respond to the first amended complaint filed on November 2nd. Okay? It's mainly the part we're focusing on is the part about returning those stolen documents or destroying them. Next slide, please. Okay. After several days, Plaintiff Boris, that's the former executive secretary for Tim Ballard, filed her response to after several delays. Plaintiff Boris filed her response to Ballard's motion, the motion he filed in December, on Friday, January 26, 2024. This response, and technically this isn't exactly right. I'm giving you the broad outlines because I'm going to break it down a little bit more to try and go from the simple to the complex. Hopefully that'll make it easier to understand. This response contains an addendum, which is 168 pages of additional documents, text messages, letters, etc., like they had on the first complaint, but they're different. Okay? That's the addendum that last Friday on February 9th, Ballard's attorneys filed a motion to strike. Not the exhibits that were on the original complaint that had already been dealt with. This is a bunch, 168 pages more documents like this. This is just going to get better. So this is the addendum that Ballard's February 9th, 2024 motion seeks to have sealed. Next slide, please. Okay, now this is going to get just a little bit complicated. Tim Ballard's attorneys filed their motion on Friday, February 9th, 2024. We know that. But this Ballard motion isn't to suppress the statements attached to the complaint, which was already granted, remember, on January 12th. It is a motion to suppress the statements attached to the response to their motion to destroy or return the statements from the complaint. In other words, Ballard files a motion to have the now classified documents returned and an expedited deposition with plaintiff Boris, the former executive secretary, to find out how she got the documents, when she got the documents, whether her attorney was involved in her getting the documents, and whether the documents were given to anybody else, so they can try and track them down and get them all off the market. In plaintiff Boris's response to this motion by Tim Ballard, the plaintiffs file 168 pages more of such documents. I know I'm repeating myself, but this is important to understand, and repetition helps me understand. On Friday, January 26, 2024, 12 days after the judge already ruled that the documents attached to the complaint should be classified as private. Are you seeing what's going on here? Are you seeing why it is that Tim Ballard's lawyers might rightfully be a little bit upset with the way the plaintiffs are conducting themselves? And more importantly, the judge might be a little bit upset with the way the plaintiffs are conducting themselves. The judge on January 12th says, okay, we're going to take all these documents that you filed gratuitously on your complaint. We're going to classify them as private. And then later that same month, they're added again. And they're filing 168 pages more of this stuff with their response. So these are the documents in the addendum this motion seeks to strike. Next file, or next slide, please. Here's the motion that was filed on Friday. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I just taken out a few excerpts so you can understand where Timothy Ballard's lawyers are coming from and why it is that they feel the way they do. So it's called a motion to strike plaintiff's addendum and or supplement to memorandum opposing defendant Timothy Ballard's motion to strike. See, they were filed as part of their response to the motion. And now we get a timeline from Ballard's attorneys as to what's been going on. Next, please. Relevant background. On December 20th, 2023, Mr. Ballard filed the motion to strike. Remember, that's the December motion. Mr. Ballard and his attorney, Whitney Z. Bernstein, submitted declarations in support of the motion. Pursuant to the Utah Rules of Civil Procedure, the deadline to file a memorandum opposing the motion was January 3rd, 2024. There's all sorts of rules about timing and how quickly you have to file things in response. And theirs was apparently, what was that? That's basically 14 days later. So their rule is 14 days after you receive a motion, you got 14 days to file a response. Okay. If you miss that, then you can be in trouble. And they did miss that. And here's what happened. So they had till January 3rd to file their response, but plaintiff's counsel sought an extension until January 12th. So in other words, they didn't go to court. They just went to the other party and said, look, we're not going to be able to get this done in time. Do you mind if we have some extra time to January 12th? And that was agreed to by Ballard's attorneys. It says Mr. Ballard granted that request. Granted is probably the wrong word because usually it's only judges who grant stuff, but Mr. Ballard agreed to that request. Plaintiffs failed to file a memorandum opposing the motion by the agreed upon January 12th deadline, so they blow that deadline as well. Now, on January 15th, after the time to respond to the motion had expired, Mr. Ballard filed a notice to submit, requesting that the court decide the motion on the papers. So what that means is that they haven't filed their motion. They asked for a continuance. It was agreed to. They blow that deadline as well. So now Ballard is filing something with the court saying, okay, judge, it's ready for you to rule on. The other side hasn't filed a motion in opposition. So we're going to ask you just to rule based upon our motion alone. They have a right to respond. They have a chance to respond, but they blew the deadline. So they don't have that right anymore is the nature of this motion. Plaintiffs failed to find, okay. Notice to submit. Okay. Paragraph 5. That same day, January 15, when they filed the motion to submit, Ms. Boris and plaintiff's counsel attended an orchestrated press conference to announce that they had traveled to California the week prior to make reports with police departments against Mr. Ballard in 4 new jurisdictions with new allegations that were not contained in either version of the complaints filed in this case. They give the name of the case, all right? In the 3rd Judicial District Court in and for Salt Lake County, state of Utah. The press conference was publicized in several news articles. Plaintiffs, that'll become important here in a second, because it appears that instead of representing their clients and filing the responses in a timely manner, Boris's attorneys are out holding press conferences and traveling to California and accompanying their client to make criminal complaints in several jurisdictions there. Okay. Now, number 6, paragraph 6, plaintiff's counsel emailed on the evening of January 15th to ask defense counsel to withdraw the notice to submit, explaining they had docketed the incorrect deadline. Oh my gosh. You know, how does that happen? Email, and it gives a reference, email from Alan Mortensen to T. Jordan. Plaintiff's counsel then represented that they had been working on the response all weekend and would be ready to file it tomorrow. Counsel advised that he would file a motion for leave to file the response tomorrow if Mr. Ballard did not agree to withdraw the notice to submit. So in other words, they're saying, hey, Ballard's lawyers, would you withdraw that motion to submit and give us another chance? That's what they're saying. Give us another chance to file this response. And kind of surprisingly to me, Ballard's attorneys agree. They say, okay, we'll do it. Paragraph 7, Mr. Ballard granted the request as a professional courtesy and withdrew the notice to submit. If we can get the next slide. With the understanding that plaintiffs would file their opposition and any supporting materials on January 16th. On January 16th, plaintiffs filed the memorandum opposing defendant Timothy Ballard's motion to strike. But they don't file any declaration from Ms. Boris or anybody else. They just file their response. There's no supporting documentation for it, which is odd. Although the opposition cites to allegations made by Ms. Boris. So in other words, in their response, they cite to allegations made by Ms. Boris, but there's no supporting declaration signed by Ms. Boris attached to it or filed separately with the response as one would normally expect. And although counsel had been with Ms. Boris the entire preceding week and weekend, plaintiffs did not contemporaneously file any declaration from her. Instead, in a footnote, plaintiffs stated that they, quote, intend to submit a signed declaration from Celeste Boris at an unspecified time in the future. Okay, this is getting really, really crazy. They are so far behind. They've blown through several deadlines. They've got the opposing counsel, Tim Ballard's lawyers, to give them break after break after break. They finally get them to withdraw their motion just to have it heard on their motion alone without any opposing motion since they've blown through the deadline. They filed their opposition, but they don't file any supporting declarations with it. So plaintiffs filed the addendum. Okay, the addendum. So that was on January 16th, right? On January 26th, 10 days later, they get around to filing this declaration from Celeste Boris. But that's not the only thing they file as an addendum. They file 168 pages more of texts, of there's supposed to be text messages, supposed to be emails, supposed to be letters, all sorts of stuff along the same vein as what it was that was attached to the complaints. It's different stuff, but it's the same kind of stuff. A lot of it's not relevant. It's not supported by any kind of foundation. It's really, frankly, it's an obvious attempt to try this case in the press. And it's obvious that that's what the plaintiff's attorneys have been doing all along with their press conferences and with attaching all of this material to the complaints, which is out of the ordinary. And they're still doing it. And the thing that they're doing is they're doing it after the judge already ruled that the first stuff that they attach to the complaints should be sealed. So I don't know how the judge is going to take this because they haven't had that hearing yet, but I'll be anxious to find out. If I were the judge, I wouldn't be happy about it. So let's see, 10 days. Plaintiffs filed the addendum on Friday, January 26th at 3:38 p.m., 10 days after they filed the opposition. The addendum includes a declaration from Celeste Boris and exhibits A through F. It also purports that they had always reserved their opportunity to file a late declaration. Like, you have that ability? Come on. Plaintiffs did not file a motion to seek leave from the court before filing the untimely addendum, nor did they request a stipulation from Mr. Ballard. Okay? The addendum is filled with allegations that have nothing to do with the core issue of the motion to strike. And the reason I find that easy to believe is because you could say the same thing about the addendums and the complaints. So much of that stuff had nothing to do with the lawsuit that were being filed. It was just stuff that was designed to be embarrassing, salacious material about Tim Ballard to drag his name through the mud in the press and hopefully soften him up so he would do a quick resolution of the case. That's what it looks like to me. It's what it looks like to his attorneys too. The addendum is filled with allegations that have nothing to do with the core issue of the motion to strike. Remember, their motion to strike is based upon the Ms. Boris, the former executive secretary, stealing these materials and now needing to return them. That's the issue. So in their response, they're throwing all 168 pages of stuff in there, i.e., whether the plaintiffs wrongly obtained the documents attached to their FAC in a manner that circumvented the discovery process. The addendum also continues plaintiffs' pattern of self-help litigation and taking and publishing Mr. Ballard's documents without his permission. The addendum's exhibits are unauthenticated, true, lack foundation, true, and contain inadmissible, true, and irrelevant, true, and untrue hearsay. For example, Exhibit A contains a fictional book pitch containing wildly inaccurate and sensationalized statements about Mr. Ballard. Mr. Ballard did not author this book pitch. It is written by a ghostwriter and did not authorize its publication. Contrary to her under oath declaration, Ms. Boris received a copy only in her capacity as the executive assistant, a copy that Mr. Ballard asked her to print for him. The addendum is also rife with conclusory allegations involving other people Ms. Boris never claims to have personally witnessed, i.e., hearsay, and salacious and irrelevant conclusory allegations concerning Mr. Ballard. Several news organizations reported on the contents of the voluminous addendum the evening it was filed. So then they say the court should strike the addendum. Since the inception of this case, by the way, I'm not happy about this, and I'm not happy about the way the plaintiff's attorneys are taking Tim Ballard, who is not a very sympathetic figure in my book, and they're turning him into a victim by the way they're prosecuting this case. Since the inception of this case, plaintiffs' tactics have demonstrated their intent to litigate this matter in the media rather than before the judiciary. They have repeatedly disregarded evidentiary and procedural rules that safeguard parties from the introduction of evidence that is confidential, privileged, prejudicial, or otherwise not relevant to the issues presented. With their purported addendum, plaintiffs have shirked those rules yet again by filing a late declaration and irrelevant, improper exhibits. Rather than addressing the central issue that Ms. Boris stole documents from Mr. Ballard's email instead of obtaining them through the normal discovery process, plaintiffs have introduced irrelevant testimony and unauthenticated documents consisting of fictional manuscripts and unauthenticated excerpted text message, I think that's supposed to be messages, in an attempt to further smear Mr. Ballard before the court can reach the merits of the underlying motion to strike. These tactics are prejudicial to Mr. Ballard as they threaten to poison the prospective jury pool in 4 separate cases and are especially egregious given that these plaintiffs claim that they should be able to litigate this case anonymously. The court should therefore strike the addendum as untimely and not relevant to the motion to strike. So that's the motion that they're filing, is to strike this 168-page addendum that they filed with their response to the motion to strike. Response to the motion to strike, I should say. So this is, it's very concerning to me. It should be concerning to everybody who is interested in the orderly process of the law. I mean, the rules are there for a reason, and the rules are there to make things work as best as they possibly can. So much of this stuff that was added onto these documents would not be admissible in court. They're not relevant. There's all sorts of things. There's even at least one letter that they included as a document that says across the front of it that it's attorney-client privileged. And that means Tim Ballard's attorney-client privileged. That apparently or allegedly Ms. Boris got a hold of through her access to things when she was his executive assistant, and then they attach it here. I think there were at least 2 of those that were marked that way. So this is the kind of thing that's going on with the case. It seems like a really good case. It seems like plaintiffs' attorneys are more interested in flying across the country, holding press conferences, and trying to try this case in the press than they are in litigating it in the courthouse. And I think that's a disservice to the law. I think it's a disservice to Tim Ballard, and I think it's a disservice to the plaintiffs as well. But that's what's going on here with the Tim Ballard case.
I remember you said at that very first press conference in the fall, you said this is sort of a publicity stunt. Do you remember talking about that to me? Yeah, this seems to like really kind of follow up with that exact thing. So what you're saying then is that there is a lot more information that probably shouldn't even have been attached. It's just there. Does that mean we have to podcast about it? Is it available? I'm tired. I need more Diet Coke.
Well, I will tell you, I started getting the very distinct impression that the plaintiffs' attorneys were playing the media for all they were worth.
Right.
And then I stopped following it as closely. There wasn't much going on, but I stopped following it at that point because I didn't want to be complicit in what they were pulling, frankly. Even though, of course, it makes for great podcasting. It makes for great newscasting, right? Because now we get all these salacious details that people want to hear, whether or not they have anything to do with the case and whether or not they're admissible. By the way, there were a couple more slides, weren't there, Bill, that because if you want to know what these kinds of things are, if you can go to the next slide, Bill, they summarize them here. If we go to the full screen.
Yep.
The exhibits to Ms. Boris's declaration consist of the following. Exhibit A, 2 publishing proposals that Mr. Ballard did not author. This is once again being characterized by Tim Ballard's lawyers. 2 publishing proposals that Mr. Ballard did not author. These book proposals were never approved nor published by Mr. Ballard or anyone on his behalf. They are unauthenticated and inadmissible and inaccurate hearsay. Exhibit B, unauthenticated excerpted text messages between Ms. Boris and Janet Russin. These text messages were not mentioned in the opposition and are not relevant to the determination that Ms. Boris stole documents from Mr. Ballard's email. See, they're saying, what does this have to do with anything? It makes me wonder, what does a psychic like Janet Russin even need text messaging for anyway? You know, I can understand why I'd have to text message her. No, she would know what's coming. She'd have to text message me, but she should know what I was going to text her before I did. Exhibit C, a letter of good standing from Bishop Les Eldridge, dated September 17th, 2023. That'd be 2 days after the church dropped its bombshell, right? In the Vice News article, their statement about Mr. Ballard. So on the 17th, somebody got Tim Ballard's bishop to write a letter of good standing. But it was dated September 17, 2023, text messages from Les Eldridge regarding the same, and a Spear Fund press release. Communications regarding Mr. Ballard's religious affiliation are not relevant to a determination that Ms. Boris stole documents from Mr. Ballard's email. Additionally, these documents do not demonstrate that Ms. Boris has any foundation to testify as to the result of any church court proceedings to which she admittedly did not participate. So they're talking about that he got excommunicated, I expect. Exhibit D, which I can't see. There you go. Thank you, Bill. Unauthenticated and excerpted text messages between Mr. Ballard and JJ that were not referenced in the opposition and are not relevant to a determination that Ms. Boris stole documents from Mr. Ballard's email. Remember, that's what the whole motion is about. Moreover, it is evident that texts from JJ's side of the conversation have been deleted because there are reactions to text messages that no longer appear on her side of the dialogue. So they're cutting and pasting. They're redacting certain text messages. They're only including certain text messages, and that's probably the ones that they find the most helpful to them, which means the most harmful to Tim Ballard. And if we got one more slide there. Yeah. Oh, there was one. Okay. The Utah Code of Judicial Administration affords discretion to judges to regulate or deny access to ensure the integrity of the exhibit, a fair trial, or interests favoring closure. Plaintiffs have publicized this exhibit despite clear issues regarding its integrity, issues that should be considered by the court before plaintiffs are permitted to publicize, and inaccurate, that should be an inaccurate, it says and, publicize an inaccurate and misleading version of the conversation. Stop laughing at me, Rebecca. Exhibit E, unauthenticated text messages between Mark Stott and Ms. Boris. These text messages were not referenced in the opposition and are not relevant to a determination that Ms. Boris stole documents from Mr. Ballard's email. When they say opposition, they keep saying it's not referenced in the opposition. That's the actual filing that they did file 10 days earlier on the 16th, I think it was, of January. It was just their motion, not their motion, their opposition to Ballard's motion to strike when they didn't attach any kind of declarations or exhibits to it. That's what it's talking about, the opposition to this motion. So what they're saying is all the stuff that they filed has nothing to do with anything that they wrote in their opposition motion. It's not connected in any way. It's not supporting the opposition motion. It's done gratuitously in addition to the opposition motion, has nothing to do with the opposition motion. It's just being filed to put it out there publicly and have it picked up by news agencies and run with it. That's what it means. Exhibit F, unauthenticated text messages between various Ballard family members and Miss Boris. These text messages were not referenced in the opposition and are not relevant to a determination that Ms. Boris stole documents from Mr. Ballard's email. Okay, so that's the kind of stuff that's going on in this case. It is a three-ring circus, and hopefully the judge will be, what do you call the person who's got the top hat? He's the ringleader?
The ring
Is that what he's called?
master.
The ringmaster?
Ringmaster.
Oh, very good. Thank you. Hopefully this judge will be up to it, because there's a lot of chicanery going on and a lot of clowning around going on that needs to be set right. And apparently it will only be set right with a very firm hand that may include sanctions against these attorneys. We'll see what happens.
But in the meantime, is the public able to view all of these documents and texts? They're all attached somewhere, right? That everyone can see. Yeah. See, that's I had read that about the statement that he was in good standing in the church. I thought I read that he had requested that. I didn't know you could go get a reference from your bishop that says, yeah, I'm great. And obviously that bishop had not received the memo that he was about to be excommunicated. So that's kind of different too.
Yes, isn't it though? It's very strange. It's all very entertaining. But from point of view of a podcaster, this is great stuff. And I would just love for them to just put all the dirty laundry out there, right? Because that's what everybody wants to hear. But as an attorney, I'm appalled because they're making the legal system look like a clown show.
You can't get a job here in Utah without one, by the way.
A clown show?
A written reference from your bishop.
Oh, a written.
I believe that I almost lost my job once because I could not get a written reference from my bishop, an endorsement, because I was not a full tithe payer. Yeah.
So if I could say anything to plaintiffs' counsel, I'm sure they want to listen to me. Please don't make Tim Ballard sympathetic. Okay? Quit working so hard to make him look like he's being persecuted. That's not a good tactic.
Is there any trouble that the executive secretary can get in for, quote, stealing these things? I mean, could she be liable in some way or run into some issues because they're claiming she stole the information?
I suppose so. I mean, she doesn't have really any right to take them, I suppose. And I suppose that'd have to be litigated separately, but that's why they want to have this special, speedily set deposition limited to the subject of how did you get these documents? When did you get them? And was your attorney involved in that? That might run into some attorney-client stuff, but yeah, because they're really thinking that their attorneys are involved in that. I mean, their attorneys are the ones who are attaching everything as exhibits. So it's not completely unreasonable for Tim Ballard's attorneys to think that maybe plaintiff's attorneys were involved in coaching her to get these documents while she was still the executive assistant, since she ends up filing her lawsuit only days after she quits.
The plot thickens. I think that's all we can say. And your perspective is so interesting because you are a podcaster and you are an attorney. So you see both sides of it. So that's very interesting. Yeah. I like that. Any final thoughts on this bill? And we'll go to our next story.
No, I'm just curious if there's, I guess I'm just curious if there's anybody out there who's gone through all of these documents attached and saw anything worthy of note to shine more light on what's been going on with OUR and Tim Ballard.
We'll have
But-
to find out.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny because think about how involved we all were with podcasting about Tim Ballard months ago. And then it kind of just sort of died down, when you see a news story here and there, but you don't really think it's anything and you don't really dig in. And then all of a sudden, this seemed to be something. And it'll be interesting to see if anybody wants to pick up on this information and put it out there at all. Or if we should be more respectful, like you say, RFM, and say, you know what, this shouldn't have been in there. It shouldn't have been included. Let's just let sleeping dogs lie, right?
Oh,
Some
I'm not
things-
telling everybody to be respectful or anything. I'm
Oh,
just
you would
saying that
never-
it's out
never,
there.
never.
I couldn't find it. KUTV says we've got the documents all on our
Right.
website. Well, I couldn't find this one.
Oh, okay.
And in the actual filing, that they had done, they didn't include exhibits. So I don't know where they are. I'm sure they're available to somebody somewhere, but that summarized what it was that they were about.
You
And
said
it does look like they don't have anything to do with the motion. It's just being gratuitous.
you said some things died down. Some things died down more than others.
There it
Okay.
is. That's it.
Is that a President Ballard reference? I hope not. Because it's way
Oh,
too soon for
dear.
that, Mr.
Yeah.
Real. Too soon.
Too soon. At least another month or so. That's right. All right. This has been great. Let us look at our next story. It is Black History Month, which is amazing. It's February, and there were a couple stories out there in the Mormon landscape that lend itself very well to Black History Month. So the first one that caught my eye, if we can look at our next slide, was a General Authority 70 named, and we've been talking about this before the show, how to even pronounce his name. I guess Elder Gerard Carrier. I'm sure that I'm massacring that, and somebody's going to correct me in the chat. But he addressed a group of other church leaders in Utah, and he had some really interesting things to say, ironic things to say about racism. I'll read a little bit of this here. He says, racism is a violation of the first two great commandments, to love God and to love his children. It is sufficiently serious that it may actually impact our opportunity of worshiping in the house of the Lord. So he's talking about getting a temple recommend. One of the temple recommend questions indeed asks, do you support or promote any teachings, practices, or doctrine contrary to those of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? So he seems to be implying that the church has a very strong stance against racism, and anyone that is accused of racism may not be able to be eligible for a temple recommend. He goes on to say, the global faith's position against racism is unequivocal. It is a sin. So this is a very strongly worded address from this General Authority 70 elder name that we can't quite pronounce.
Gerald
then-
Carrier.
Is that your guess? I thought maybe Gerard Perdue. I don't even want to be disrespectful and not be able to say his name. So his first name is Christopher. Maybe we'll call him Elder Christopher. So then he goes on to say, if we can go to our next slide, any of us who have prejudice toward another race needs to repent. So if you hold any of these points of view, you've got to do a lot of repenting. Racism has no place in the Lord's kingdom. It must stop, and it must stop now. It is high time we stop excluding anyone and start including everyone.
He didn't
Yeah, I
really
would-
say that, did he?
Yeah, he really did. This is
Does
why
he
I
see
chose
no
this
irony
story.
in that? Number one, that
Yeah.
it's in the Book of Mormon, the racism.
No, I know.
Apparently, they're going to excommunicate the Book of Mormon. That Book of Mormon's not going to go to the temple again anytime soon.
Never. Well, we can go through a whole list of the reasons that this is ironic. I'm trying to just let's get
Yeah,
through
it is high
Yes,
time.
I know. I
I'm
read
not
this.
trying to
and I'm like,
interrupt you, but
No,
I'm
no, you
shocked that
can't
it's
interrupt
high time
me.
we stop excluding anyone and start including everyone.
Yeah, that's what they said. I know. No, when I read this, I had to stop a few times and reread it and say, really? I just anyway, so it reminded me, of course, of President Nelson's talk that he gave back in 2020. If we can go to our next slide, where he also had some similar sentiments about how we should behave, and sort of making it sound like the church has always behaved well when it comes to this. And I think we all know that's not exactly the case. So President Nelson in October Sunday session of General Conference said, Brothers and sisters, please listen carefully to what I am about to say. God does not love one race more than another. His doctrine on this matter is clear. He invites all to come unto him, black and white, bond and free, male and female. I assure you that your standing before God is not determined by the color of your skin. Favor or disfavor with God is dependent upon your devotion to God and his commandments and not the color of your skin. He's very, very adamant here. I grieve that our Black brothers and sisters the world over are enduring the pains of racism and prejudice. Today, I call upon our members everywhere to lead out in abandoning attitudes and actions of prejudice. I plead with you to promote respect for all of God's children. So here we have these wonderfully impassioned statements to remind everyone that the church is not racist. And if anyone is enacting anything remotely like racism, that they need to abandon it immediately. And actually, their temple record may be threatened. So I know that we could all go on Google and we could look up so many statements, so many racist statements from the past prophets, past practices, the Book of Mormon. I invite you to do that if you want to. But if we go to the next slide, I just found a few overarching statements over on Mormon Stories that I thought were good because, we could spend a lot of time on that, but there's no need to. I think we all understand the history and we can all look it up. It's plainly there. I thought this was great. I saw this on Mormon Stories. And of course, this is a picture of Jane Manning, who was a servant in Joseph Smith's household. She wanted to have her work done, her endowment. She begged prophet after prophet if this could happen through the decades. Finally, they found a way by proxy to seal her as basically, they called it a servitor, a servant to Joseph Smith in the hereafter. So that's a picture of wonderful Jane Manning. So some statements from Mormon Stories. It says, for over a century, LDS prophets left little room for ambiguity when affirming the church's racial doctrines as doctrine and not mere policy. Doctrine and not policy. Those are both wiggle words and can be used interchangeably depending on how it suits people. Furthermore, the first presidency of the LDS Church tied the doctrine of African blood inferiority to a uniquely Mormon concept of the pre-existence, in which various categories of God's children were inferior, including other races. And this statement also went on to say, it mentioned people that had, perhaps handicapped. And this is true. I think we're all of an age where we grew up with that there was this idea that if you were valiant or not in the pre-existence, definitely had some kind of play onto where you ended up and who you ended up on earth. And that was certainly something that was taught to me over the pulpit, in Sunday school, in young women's. That was just, again, a doctrine or a policy. It's a wiggle word. It goes on to say, while this is no longer a doctrine or a policy of the LDS Church, an apology or clear explanation of how the mouthpieces of God could be so wrong for so long has never been provided. And that is true. No, we do not make apologies, we've been told. The church's recent essays on this topic refuse to offer an explanation of any kind, implying that its prejudicial practices were right until the moment that they were wrong. And that's exactly it. I think they stated it very, very well. So if we go to the next slide, I think it's just this major juxtaposition with the church's clearly racist past, and then this general authority elder telling us that any kind of racist ideas or behavior are a violation of the commandments. It impacts our opportunity of worshiping in the house of the Lord, and it is unequivocally, I can't even speak now either, a sin. So I don't know. Let's stop here for just one quick second before I get to the next story. Any thoughts on this? These two very strong statements, when it's like the tip of the iceberg, when you consider everything that the church has said and done for decade after decade, that actually says the opposite. What do you think, Bill?
I want to ask you both a question before you respond.
Oh,
Bill.
yeah, sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
That statement by Carrie A.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to object to what's in the statement. It's hard to object to what's in the statement by President Nelson. So what I would like to ask Bill and then Rebecca, if it's okay, how would you change that in order to, those statements, which we admit are good, how would you change them in order to make them acceptable?
Which statements, RFM?
From Carrier and from Nelson. I mean,
I
we
think
all
when-
agree that it's a
Yeah.
good thing to say
Right.
racism is wrong and, you know, it's
Yeah.
a sin. It's a violation of the second commandment. Maybe you won't go to the temple. Maybe you will. I don't know. It depends upon your bishop, I suppose. But just to come out taking this position, which certainly President Nelson has been doing. So
It's-
my question
yeah.
is, what is it that would take that statement, which on its face is good, and make it acceptable to both of you? If
I
you
would
have
say an
objections to it?
acknowledgement and an apology. That's what it needs. It needs to acknowledge that we have this terrible, terrible history, and moving forward, this is our hope. But there's no acknowledgement whatsoever at all.
Yeah, I would have said the same thing. What I would want to say here is that how can a authority in the church, again, this is a 70, how can anybody with any authority in the church say they're going to punish people with church discipline if they carry attitudes of racism when the prophets of the past would have been unworthy then by their standard to be prophets, seers, and revelators? And as you point out here with the statements, RFM, in your question and what Rebecca answered, it seems crystal clear to me, same thing, without the context of an acknowledgement and explanation and an admittance that past prophets got it wrong. Hence, prophets can get really big things seriously wrong. You probably ought to not just trust us blindly. And those leaders in the past were wrong on this issue, and we're not going to make that mistake again. This church will never select worthiness based on the color of someone's skin.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that one of the things that rubs me wrong about these kind of statements, and it's present in these as well, is that it seems that the leadership of the church pretends they never did this stuff and that it's all the members. So now the leaders have to preach to the members and they have to correct the members and tell the members not to have these racist attitudes, because if you do, dang it, you may not go to the temple. It's a sin. It's a violation of the second commandment. It's all preaching to the members that they're the problem without ever acknowledging that the members got that way because they were raised Mormon.
Yeah, the leaders taught it to you. That's how you became racist, and it was acceptable in the LDS Church in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. When I joined, there were people close to me in my family and within my in-laws, as well as within my ward, who absolutely on Sundays touted this doctrine of valiance and curses from the pre-existence and from the line of Cain and Ham. And the reason we got there was because prophets, seers, and revelators got it wrong, and then went decades of silence, not admitting they'd got it wrong.
Yeah, as recently as 2018 at the B1 celebration, Elder Oaks gets up there and makes it really clear this ban was from God.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was a horrible moment, actually. I was there. My husband sang in the Deborah Bonner Gospel Choir. I actually used to sing in the Deborah Bonner Unity Gospel Choir, too, and they were there with the Gladys Knight Choir. And, you know, it was very nice up until that moment when President Oaks said that. And I was in the audience, and there was because he really did say, "We're so sorry. We don't know why this happened. It was God. We're sorry." Yeah, there was absolutely no acknowledgement. None whatsoever. And to me, that was a huge step backwards in what they could have done. They absolutely could have done something like that. And I'm glad you brought up the whole concept of the members and why these views were there. I have a memory of being really little in my neighborhood, and there was an interracial couple riding in a red convertible down the street. They were neighbors of ours. And I remember thinking, look how fun. That looks amazing. And I distinctly remember my dad, who's a wonderful, charitable, incredible person, saying, you know, that's wrong. The prophetess said that's wrong. He took a moment to instruct me that that was not right. And he quoted a few scriptures to me, very young age, right? This is how we got that way, because we learned it at church, and our parents taught us, and our teachers taught us, and our leaders taught us. This is why this permeated the culture for decades. And so you're right to turn around and say, oh, you members, we don't know why you're this way, and your temple recommend will be taken away if you continue. We know why we were this way. So
Yeah,
too little,
in
too late
a
almost.
nutshell, The leaders are speaking. We taught you to be racist because we taught you racist doctrine. And now we're not doing it anymore. And now we're going to shame and blame you for being the racist that we made you in the first place.
How, I'll just say it a different way too. How can a member not be worthy of a temple recommend for doing the very thing that another man was able to avoid any worthiness discussion and was able to speak as the mouth of God, giving revelation to the entire church, and both men live the same standard?
Yep. No,
It sounds hypocritical to me.
Yeah,
it is.
Exactly. It's double speak. Absolutely. So let's go to our next story as we finish up here. This relates absolutely. And I've always been really fascinated by this story. And it came up again in the news this month. How the College Football Hall of Fame kicked off Black History Month. This is happening now with the Black 14, BYU, and the church. Now, if you have not heard of the Black 14, this is a really interesting chapter in the church and BYU. I think, do we have our little video clip next? I think we might. Yes, let's watch.
Tony McGee knows what it's like to battle for a championship. The Super Bowl winner's journey started in college during one of the most turbulent times in American history.
1969 protests that went on at our school at University of Wyoming.
McGee and the Cowboys were set to battle BYU, a school sponsored by the Church of Latter-day Saints. At the time, the Mormon Church did not allow black priests. A group of 14 football players decided to stand in solidarity with the Black Student Alliance and wear black armbands in protest. But when they asked their head coach, Lloyd Eaton, if they could wear the armbands for the game, he kicked them off the
Yeah. And I'll finish up there because it kind of cut out. So basically, of course, BYU and the Mormon Church in general, they said black priests, but of course they meant the priesthood ban, which I like to refer to as the eternal family ban, because nobody thinks this through, but by not allowing the males to have the priesthood, no families could be sealed. They've basically stopped your family from being an eternal family. It's just an absolutely hideous thing that was happening. So this is 1969. Civil rights movement has been going almost 15 years. Strides are being made in the country, not with the church, not with BYU. So Wyoming, they're going to play BYU in a football game, and their student alliance wants their players to protest simply by wearing a black armband to say, we object to this. You know, you are not treating, there's racism here. So they go and they ask their coach, can we just wear this black armband to protest? And he says, absolutely not. And you're all off the team. They were kicked off the team. They lost their scholarships. They lost their position. They had to leave college. It's an absolutely devastating thing, if you can even imagine that, for these 14 young men, you know, who have these bright futures. And luckily, I will say, 10 of them all went on to graduate from college. Some of them played in the NFL. It ended okay, but what a horrifying moment. So if we can go to our next slide, I'll read just a little bit about this. And this was in the Deseret News, because what they're celebrating here is that some of the members of the Black 14 have since founded a coalition to provide food to people that have food scarcity. And the church has been partnering with them. And they've been doing this for several years. They honored the Black 14 at a BYU football game a while ago. And they're always in the news for joining with these members of the Black 14 and donating food along with them. So it says, for its celebration of Black History Month, the College Football Hall of Fame invited John Griffin, Tony McGee, and their teammate Mel Hamilton to Atlanta, Georgia for a 2-day event. These are members of the Black 14 to highlight the Black 14's resilience and bravery during a pivotal moment in both societal and college football history. So the events include food donation in collaboration with the LDS Church. This is on the church's website and the Deseret News, and public screenings of a short film about the Black 14 produced by BYU students. One of the biggest successes I've had, and this is one of the Black 14 speaking, other than my marriage and my family, is doing this with Brigham Young, feeding people. he told a crowd gathered at the College Football Hall of Fame on Tuesday, February 6th. We've always tried to feed people, but the mass of people that are being fed when food security is so important, this is one of my biggest jobs right now. And then they go on to say that the day prior, the Black 14, in collaboration with the church, donated 40,000 pounds of non-perishable food items to the Atlanta Community Food Bank. The Black 14 itself has given nearly 1 million pounds of food to food banks across the country for the past 4 years with the church's help. So the church is very partnered with them as they donate food, and there always seems to be a lot of publicity involved for the church here. So if we can go to the last one, Elder, let's see. Yeah, there's one more slide, I think. Okay. Elder M. Andrew Galt, who is Andrew Galt, and Area 70, who participated in the Atlanta food donation and has developed a strong relationship with McGee, one of the Black 14, said that donations like this are about more than food. I would agree. They are about more than food. I hope that it lets people know that we care about all of God's children, he said. There are people out there that are struggling. And when we come together with different groups like the Black 14, I think it shows a story of redemption, of hope, of repentance, of just an outlook of a very good future. And then I put in larger font, that's the message that Hamilton hopes people understand when they learn about the Black 14. Exactly right. That is the message. They certainly don't want people to associate the Black 14 with the racism that was rampant in the LDS Church, to the point that the Black 14 trying to protest actually led to the events that got them kicked off the team. So to me, it's almost like the Mountain Meadows massacre. They were responsible for that. And yet the church purchases the land. They put up the signs. They control the narrative. In this case, Black 14, they were responsible for that. And yet again, they reach out. And of course, food is being given. That's great. People are being helped. But to me, it's a very convoluted message and a smokescreen and sort of just a lot of publicity. Any comments from you guys? What do you think?
I'll tell you this. This will hang over the church's head until they apologize.
Mm-hmm.
This 100 years from now, 200 years from now, this will hang over the church's head until they acknowledge that prophets can get really big things seriously wrong, and they got this wrong. And once they apologize, we can all start to move on from it. But until they do, it will be with us forever. It will be the one thing that actually does go through all time and eternity in Mormonism.
Yeah, I agree. What do you think, RFM?
I'm ambivalent about this whole story. On the one hand, I understand that the church isn't the one that got him kicked off the team directly, right? They wanted to protest the church's discrimination, and then they go to their coach, and their coach says, "You're out of here." So the church, I don't know if the coach was Mormon, but regardless, the thing is that the church caused it. The other side of that is that collaborating to provide food for people who don't have it is a good thing. And
100%.
at bottom, I think that's a good thing. And I think that the members of the Black 14 are to be applauded, at least by me, for maybe being bigger in soul than I might be, and looking at the people that they're trying to serve who need their help and putting their needs above their own personal feelings about how they're collaborating with the people that indirectly got them kicked off of the football team, right?
Yeah.
So props to them. If you can go back to that slide, though, this is the part that really chapped my hide, because the church wants the lesson from them collaborating with the Black 14 to help people have food.
Here.
Yeah.
I hope that it lets people know that we care about all of God's children. I can't even believe that.
Yeah.
Because
it's sending the message.
Because they don't care about all of God's children, at least not equally, and at least not in 1969, and not today either. It's just a different group. Apparently, the church always has to have some group it's crapping on in order to feel good about itself. Back then, it was the blacks. Now it's the LGBTQ community.
Yeah.
So, but I hope that it lets people know that we care about all of God's children. What a sanctimonious SOB, Elder M. Andrew Galt. That's all I can say to you, sir.
Who is Elder Galt? That's what I say. And let's stay on the slide for one more quick second, because I do want to point out in 1969, Hugh B. Brown, the amazing Hugh B. Brown, went through policy, doctrine. He studied history, and he said to David O. McKay, we can reverse this. We can give them the priesthood. This was just policy. We can do it. And David O. McKay, listen, this is the same year that this is happening with the Black 15. And they actually earmarked a gentleman named Monroe Fleming, I believe it was. And they were going to give him the priesthood. So who finds out that this is going to happen? Harold B. Lee and Joseph Fielding Smith. It's not going to happen. Those two absolutely said there is no way, we're not doing this. They blocked it completely. 1969, things could have changed. And that next year, when Joseph Fielding Smith became the prophet, Hugh B. Brown, who I call the Dieter Uchtdorf of his day, was relieved of his duties in the first presidency. He was demoted, most people believe, because of his views of, racial tolerance, and let's just give them the priesthood. So people were trying, I think is what I want to point out. People within the apostles, people within the leadership were trying. They knew it had to be done, but it was blocked by people like, and I'll name them, Harold B. Lee and Joseph Fielding Smith, Mark E. Peterson, and Staley, I believe is his name. I can't, but yeah, they had to do a lot of work around with these 4 individuals to get this to pass. And it took, another decade almost before it did. So, and I will say that everything I've read about the Black 14, they are absolutely magnanimous, wonderful people who have forgiven and moved on and are just committed to doing good for society. And exactly what you said, RFM, they are the heroes in this, and they should be commended in every way. So interesting 2 stories, though, I thought, for Black History Month. So, all right, I think we covered it. What do you think? Any other thoughts or things that come to mind? Have we done it?
I just have one comment about that picture of N. Eldon Tanner. He was in the first presidency when I joined the church in 1978. Do you have that up there again? That picture of him? There he is, bottom left.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a rare headshot of N. Eldon Tanner. That's back from the days when he was working as the understudy for Christopher Lee in his role as Dracula for Hammer Studios, I think.
You had to go there. Yeah, some of these old pictures are really funny, and these are the apostles and the leaders of my day. And I look at them, I go, did they look like that back then? I don't remember, but they sure look a little unusual now. So, all right. Well, this has been great.
Have you seen Elder Bednar lately?
Have I? Well, I did do that news story on AI and Elder Bednar 2 weeks ago, I think it was. So yes, absolutely. All right. Well, I think we've done it. I hope that you guys have enjoyed what we had to say and learned a little something. And next week, we will be back again on Monday night at 6 p.m. Before we go, and that would be Mountain Time, is there anything, Bill or RFM, that you would like to invite everybody to watch, to view? Would you like to mention any of your other shows or podcasts to point the people in the direction of really good viewing?
Well, first off, I'd say like and subscribe the Mormon Newscast, whether you're watching it on the Mormonish YouTube channel, on the Mormon Discussion YouTube channel, or some other place on social media. And, on both of those, we're doing weekly podcasts.
Yeah.
RFM, I know you've started one with Mormon Sunday School and Shakespeare. Do you want to say anything about those?
Oh, yeah. Mormon Sunday School. That's me and you, baby. I'm doing the Come Follow Me manual on a weekly basis. And you, sir, are doing the Gospel Principles manual for investigators, comparing the 1979 manual with the current manual and seeing what's different, what's up, and what is it they're not really telling you when they're trying to get investigators to join the church.
I will say there are lots of people commenting that say that come in and say this stuff isn't true, and they must not have a clue what Mormonism taught 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah, it's sad. It's unfortunate, because the church inculcates in its members a trust in the leadership that is wholly unwarranted, unjustified, and undeserved, such that they tell them, we're telling you the truth. Mm-hmm. And then they go out and say, well, if you're telling me something different than what they're saying, then you've got to be lying, only to find out later down the road that you were the one telling the truth, Bill, and it was somebody else who was doing the lying.
Yeah. And I want to give you a second as well, Rebecca. What is Mormonish working on?
Oh my goodness. We are dropping an episode tomorrow night at 6 p.m. about a path forward theologically for same-sex sealings in the temple. It was really interesting to research. And if you're interested in that, I would encourage you to check it out on Mormonish at 6 p.m. tomorrow night.
Awesome. You want to let the folks know about Mormonism Live on Wednesday, Bill, which is Valentine's Day, in case anybody thought at the top of the show that you two were confusing today with Valentine's Day.
Just a quick note, RFM and I will be recording the episode actually tomorrow evening. We will publish it on Wednesday because I'm hoping that both of us have got a date to go on and a movie to see or a dinner to go to with the lovely lady in our lives. And it's not the same lovely lady, so don't roll your eyes, RFM. And
What do you think?
So we're going to enjoy Valentine's Day, but we will definitely have an episode of Mormonism Live ready for you at 6:20 p.m. on the Mormon Discussion channel. Mormonism Live is a weekly call-in show where we go over various things in Mormonism and leave a little time at the end for you to call in and share your thoughts.
So there won't be any call-in this Wednesday. Is that what you're telling us?
They could certainly try, but we won't be there to answer.
Will it go directly to your cell phones and interrupt you on your dates? Honey, I got to take this. Sorry.
But there will be live chat for all of you who are sitting at home alone on Valentine's Day. That's a terrible thing to say, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the place to be, the live chat. It's always very fun. And I'm encouraged to know that you both have personal lives. That's nice. I'm glad you can balance it. A lot of us can't. It's all good. All right, everybody. Thank you. Thank you to Bill Reel. Thank you to Radio Free Mormon. This has been another amazing and interesting discussion, and so fascinating for us to dive into these stories and research them throughout the week. I think we learn a lot and hopefully are able to share that with all of you in a way that's meaningful. So we'll say goodbye for now, and we'll see you next Monday at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Rebecca.